how easy it is to become addicted to the outrage in the commons. The world of social media is catered to the recreation of offense. It's basically a bandwagon of Me Too's. I'll protest that person or that issue because everyone's doing it. And for those who aren't, well, they're just not socially acceptable. Let's look at an example. U.S. public administration. It's so popular today to describe the American president with negative adjectives that it's ostensibly sinful to remain quiet or say the opposite. First off, I personally can't wait to see a real president in the White House in the U.S. The current seat holder is compulsively destructive and seems to hold all that is dear to America, both stateside and abroad, in complete and utter disdain. Even a dud would be better. For a dud would at least cruise idly without destroying and attacking. So that's clear and transparent on my part. Let's move on. But it's all too popular to criticize the man without the facts, or question the facts if they are associated with him in any way. Recent news about botched testing kits in the U.S., their source, and their impact elicited opinions ranging from anger against those ostensibly supporting Trump to rendering the news as conspiracy theories and non-factual. Basically, information was revealed that suggested that the Centers for Disease Control in the U.S. had procured test kits that were faulty somehow, and the U.S. president was attempting to extricate himself from any blame, in fact deflect the dialogue onto past administrations. This one perked my ears since I'd had some experience years ago working with representatives in emergency preparedness in the United States and coordinating similar models in Canada that would ensure adequacy of supplies, practices, and procedures in the case of an emergency, specifically in this case as regards handling populations that are vulnerable. So I found the discussion fascinating. The natural tendency in some media, and certainly among the masses on social media, was to dismiss the information as false. No attempt at dialogue in this instance would be useful. Social media helped tailor the narrative towards the recreation of offense, and like a street mob, the behavior of ostracizing those whose opinions were contrary seemed to grow virally. That's the observation. So, what's behind the story? If one were to look at historical patterns of funding at the federal level in the U.S., one would see that many government agencies, boards, and commissions began dealing with cuts and various measures of budgetary freezes starting around 2002. To my recollection, George W. Bush was president. Budgetary funding patterns remained on a negative trend until 2016. So, that now includes another president, Barack Obama. In 2016, the cuts began at a deeper rate. According to the May 23rd edition of The Economist, on page 18, and I'm quoting, "The CDC's budget has been flat since 2016. However, the two main programs for helping state and local healthcare systems prepare for emergencies have been cut by over 50% in real terms since 2003. Unquote. It goes on to say that departments can no longer get the help they need from the CDC. Unquote. So, the CDC has been dealing with what some could call underfunding, and it crosses 3 presidential administrations, albeit with more severe funding deficiencies during the recent 4-year cycle. Yet people don't want that information. Back to the original news piece we're discussing. There was an item about faulty test kits. Turning again to The Economist, this time in the May 30th edition on page 16, quote, "Some states might have shut down earlier had they had enough testing capacity to properly evaluate the spread of the virus. Alas," the article continues, "the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention botched the manufacturing of the test for the virus that it had created in January. Thus much of the head start which might have made America safer was lost." Finally, they write, "This was not Mr. Trump's fault. He did not set the timing of the lockdowns, sabotage the CDC, or fetter the private labs. But that does not exonerate him." End quote. I looked at the budgets since 2003, which the article cites, and even compared the trend to 2002 for safety. It all matches up. So the so-called fake news, the information people did not want to hear, the information that did not support their existing narrative, was always correct, and continues to be so. But the masses are too addicted to the outrage of the original news item, and the correspondent blame on the current US president. Now, The Economist is only one publication, but it's a globally renowned and widely respected one. Another example of the addiction to outrage and the hypocrisy of it looks to the stay-at-home messaging. It's interesting to see that those, at least in my own personal and anecdotal experience, have been most vocal about chastising people for going on walks in March and April are the very ones who tend not to go out at all themselves. But that's the narrative. That is what's most important. The narrative reinforced through social media established you must remain at home, although the guidelines never did. They stressed the importance of infrequent trips to the grocery store, social distancing, avoiding areas where people would naturally gather, but also the importance of getting daily outdoor exercise. But the stay-at-home narrative and its various configurations and hashtags served as the popular go-to. And then came the recreation of offense, where you'd see people going apeshit over the posting of pretty flowers in the garden or the sunset from down the street. These people who were posting such outdoor images needed to be ostracized, shamed, because they were finding something positive and valuable in life. Hashtag stay at home wasn't about social distancing or the factual guidelines given by health officials. It was about locking yourself in, locking yourself away from society, refraining from enjoying anything that was contrary to its narrative. I could make many guesses as to why this was the case, why those with that particular lot in life seemed to embrace misery over beauty. What's doubly fascinating is how quickly those who took to the recreation of offense even more quickly stepped down from their sanctimonious high horses to join protests, or the case of thousands of younger people hanging out in parks en masse. Stay at home, but only when it suits your mood du jour. The addiction to outrage is far more seductive. Oh, and incidentally, not one fine, ticket, or compliance notice to anyone gathered by the thousands in those parks. Break the narrative, and the masses can't handle it. Even more so, break the addiction, and as Jack Nicholson reminded us in one of his movies not so long ago, people can't handle the truth. There is a difference among the terms coronavirus, novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, and COVID-19. But it's fascinating to see how interchangeably they are used in the media, and how armchair experts on social media who claim to know so much about everything can't explain the difference, much less what the letters in COVID represent. A famous refrain from a Rush song says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." But as W.P. Kinsella wrote, and I'll build on this one a bit, for God's sakes, please say it ain't so. Visit stephenchristiansen.ca for more episodes. This podcast is available on premium streaming platforms including Anchor, TuneIn, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Stephen Christiansen. Thanks for listening.